friends, and thank you for joining us on Charting the Way Forward, where we deliver research-informed strategy and intelligence from across the Democratic coalition. This podcast is produced by Way to Win. I'm your host, Kerry Eleveld, and today I am joined by...
Hi, everyone. I'm Tory Gavito, president and co-founder of Way to Win.
Okay, and we are thrilled today to welcome a guest who I'm quite certain all of our listeners know of, but I'll introduce her anyway. This is a little bit of a name that person game for our listeners. Our watchers are going to know, but our listeners, just hang with me here. She was the youngest person ever elected to chair a state Democratic Party when she won the position in 2023 at the ripe old age of 25. She's worked on congressional campaigns in both the House and the Senate, and as an Iowa field organizer for the presidential campaigns of both Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren. In a short amount of time, she has become a force in Democratic politics and a pivotal party chair in a key state that is growing swingier by the minute. Yes, you guessed it. Let's welcome North Carolina Democratic Party Chair Anderson Clayton.
Woo-hoo. I feel like they need sound effects now. It's like some kind of the reveal of the mystery date.
I'm concerned whenever you cue Dan on sound effects, what's going to come next. Okay, so
go Dan.
Nice. Okay. Anderson, why don't we start with a question that fills in a little bit about your backstory. Before you served as state chair, you served as the Democratic Party chair of Person County, which is home to roughly, yes, I did some homework here. I was bouncing around on a little county map thing of North Carolina. Roughly 40,000 people in Percy County. How does that work at the local level, sort of working at the local level, sort of inform your approach to serving as a state that's more than 11 million residents and growing?
I think you look at it as though every county has a different story to tell. And honestly, it means that your message can be diversified across the different regions of North Carolina. You know, I think every state would say that it feels like you've got 3 states in one, especially if you're somewhere like Texas or New Mexico, or I've even heard it from places like Massachusetts that will say that too. And I just think that looking at the different geographies of each state is really important for how we're able to localize our messaging so that everything's not coming just from the top down, that actually everything is coming from the bottom up and that it's getting elevated in the right way. Because I think what we've seen for so long from the Democratic Party is this nationalized approach to politics in a way that's been detrimental, not just to the party brand, but also to the issues that we elevate at a national level and the things that we talk about. And sometimes I feel like that's what's gotten us alienated from the ground. And in so many ways, having a party that's reinvested in localizing everything that we do has made it so that our relationships in our counties are stronger. People are more willing to understand the connective tissue, right? Because if you know what's happening at the local level, you know what should be happening at the state level and at the federal level, because you're getting it from what your local budget is missing, and where does that budget come from? A state budget, and where does that budget lack in its what are its capabilities and what it's able to do, looking at a federal budget. And I just think that the best candidates that I've seen too are people that have been a city councilor, a mayor, and then come up through and they understand what each level of power and sort of our civic engagement system is actually supposed to be. Because right now, so many folks don't understand that the closer you get to the bottom of the ballot, the closer you get to your front door, right? And I feel like a good state party that understands that can really dive in on some of like the niche issues that we're seeing happen across the state right now.
And I can't help but think, I love what you just said about the front door, because as you were talking and I was thinking about really what that means to come from a community, what was it, 15,000 people, Kerry? It's like, you know the faces and the names behind those front doors too. Like you get to know the people, you know what they're really struggling with. Like, yeah, it personalizes it so much more because you're from the place.
And I think that's what we've tried to build in North Carolina, honestly, is a state party where everybody who works for us is either from the state or they've got a piece of the state in their heart and they lived there for a long time. Because I really do believe that you can only organize communities that you know and that they trust you. And I feel like the reason why I organized in Person County and I chose to come back home really after being in national politics for so long was that I understood from all of the learning that I had done on these great national campaigns that had given me such incredible opportunities, that the people that you're going to be able to influence the most are the ones that know you. And now I had been trained to be this incredible organizer. And I was like, wow, I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to go to a really small county in North Carolina and I'm going to use it to make this county better. And so a lot of the national training that I got, I was able to take and put at that local level. And that's honestly what I see as the benefit now to what we're doing as a state party, is that we want to be able to train everybody as you would if you were on a presidential campaign. How do we make that organizer in each local community and county to be able to see the opportunity in their own backyard again? Because everybody can be that type of person. It's just, are the opportunities there for you? And I think growing up in a rural part of North Carolina, I would have never said like field organizing or working on a campaign was a job that you could have had. And we're trying to break that open this year, because to your point, Tory, right, the diversity of who we have on these campaigns and also who we have in our ecosystems, like they matter, and their backgrounds and their lived experiences matter for how we're thinking about how we're talking to people, not just on the doors, but in general.
Yeah.
Do you have a top, I mean, this kind of goes along with what you're saying, but do you have like an overarching top 3 goals as party chair right now? Or, maybe you have 5 or maybe you have 2. I don't know. Do you have like some sort of guiding light that you're like, well, this is what I'm setting out to do?
I want to flip the North Carolina State Supreme Court by 2028. And we have been on a 3-step plan to basically make that happen. When I came into this job in 2023, we have 7 Supreme Court justices in North Carolina. 5 of them were Republican, 2 of them were Democrat. And when I came into this job, we were looking at 2 election cycles where we had back-to-back holds that we were going to have to make happen. And that is a hard thing to do in a state where we had just come off of 2020 and 2022 cycles of losing U.S. Senate elections and Supreme Court elections in North Carolina that really, I think, made a lot of national partners sort of doubt whether or not North Carolina was possible again. And so 2024, we won a state Supreme Court race by 734 votes out of 5.5 million cast, with the help of people on this call right here, for making sure that Justice Allison Riggs got over the line in North Carolina, even as we saw Donald Trump carry the state by 3 points. And we've got to do the same thing again this year by reelecting Justice Anita Earls to my state Supreme Court. And in 2028, I've got 3 Republican seats that will be up. And that means that we can reverse partisan and racial gerrymandering in 2029 and be able to actually give back representation to the Democratic Party for our congressional seats in 2020 or 2030. Because what we're looking at is that Louisiana versus Calais made it so that, the South is losing a lot of representation that we so desperately need in Congress, especially for Black people throughout our entire region of the South. And I think that North Carolina has the opportunity to be this sort of, how do we go on the offense and before redistricting and reapportionment happens across the country again? And North Carolina is the state where we can do that. And so that is step number 1. It is what we put a lot of our time, our energy, our focus, our money into. And we can see that is working. And proof was in the pudding to me in 2024, because we had somebody full-time in North Carolina's state party that was focused on judicial races. We're the only state party in the country that I know of that had a full-time judicial director in 24. We've kept that same person on throughout 26. And so that was a huge goal of ours too, is not just winning back the state Supreme Court, but building up a year-round organizing, voter protection, judicial department and program, and keeping on this year-round staff to be able to make sure that we were ready to fight any fight that came our way. And that's exactly what we did, because that Supreme Court fight was drawn out to a 6-month election denialism in 2025, where Republicans tried to use federal and state laws to rig elections and retroactively throw out 68,000 voters in North Carolina that had done everything right at the ballot box. So keeping year-round staff was number 2 for me. And then number 3 is really building an infrastructure that's built to last, because North Carolina for so long, I think the side of the state party has really ebbed and flowed. And I'm trying to make sure that financially we are sustainable so that we can keep that infrastructure, but we can keep building, because I really want to expand to having my dream state party as an organizer in every county. You know what I mean? And that budget, I realized a long time ago in this job, was far bigger than what I was imagining in my head at one point. I have become a small business owner. I have 25 people that work for me, and I now know what that costs. So shout out to all my small business owners out there right now that are struggling to do everything that they are, because you are superhumans to me in every way too. But just, trying to make sure we do what we need to do. But those 3 goals are biggest, at least for the NCDP. Election wise, though, I've got a lot more for what we need to win this year. So Kerry, I could talk about that too, but you let me know.
what I love about it is you are thinking about each of the branches of government, because we are learning at the national level how important it is that we have, an executive function, a legislative function, and a judiciary that is not undermining our go every step of the way. And if you can build that microcosm in North Carolina, in a southern state, no less, it would be amazing as a model moving forward. And even the fight for it puts the other side on notice that they can't get away with so many things that they're getting away with at the federal level. And I will say, I think that the fight that North Carolinians are putting up for each of the branches of government within their state, but also within y'all's thinking about your federal delegation, has definitely I think the way Tom Tillis is showing up, actually asking questions of his party and actually asking questions of people in positions of power at the federal level, to me, reminds me what happens when you fight at the local level, because he knew before the other wounded bears, what do they call them? The Wounded Bear Caucus. It's like Tom Tillis, John Cornyn, Cassidy, right? Those other guys weren't vocal the way Tom Tillis was first. And I credit the organizing of the Democrats in North Carolina to just remind him he's not going to get very far in his retirement if he's not showing a little bit of spine.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I credit all of the organizations across the state that are honestly C3 organizations that have watched the people that they help the most, our food banks that have been such big advocates, our local elected leaders that have been such big advocates, because they're the ones that are seeing this firsthand and on the front lines of it. When the federal government makes cuts like that, the first people that are at that have to make the case of how they're going to step up to help, it's that the need doesn't disappear, right? The problem just becomes somebody else's. And so our local elected leaders have had to step up in ways that are unprecedented. Our state legislators have been on the front lines of that too, of trying to figure out how do we help people be able to afford their basic necessities right now, while we have Republicans that are cutting healthcare, gutting access to SNAP benefits, and want to keep people in these positions, right, that they seem to find themselves in right now. And I think you're right, Tori, of everything that we have to do is focused on a local level. And I'm really appreciative of national partners too, seeing that as well, because I think that's what we're trying to build here every step of the way. I should also say, just to be honest with you, we're also trying to win a U.S. Senate election. Everybody, I think that is so crystal clear on what North Carolina's got to do this year. But I take that as not my what I would say my state party goals are, but electorally, we've got so much on the ballot this year that's going to matter. And our state Supreme Court, I think, to me, impacts so many other things in Congress, and looking long term at what can a party do to really make Tori, to your point, that long term infrastructure and investment and that strategy really be existent in us. And so, but yeah.
Let me, before we get into the electoral goals, because I did have separate, your state party goals, the electoral goals. And then, of course, there would be some overlap. But just before we do that, I want to, because we're talking about, too, this idea that, voters can vote, but then all of a sudden the Supreme Court is trying to throw out, the Supreme Court in the state is trying to throw out 68,000, votes or something like that. Right. So it's, we had Todd Zimmer on from down home North Carolina probably a couple months ago. And he was talking about just at the local level, getting people to believe that their vote mattered and that they could make a difference, and how important it was just for them as an organization to get people in the mindset that they could make a difference, that they had agency in their lives, and that their vote mattered. And I do wonder, how do you look at that, especially in a state where, Governor Cooper, former Governor Cooper gets elected, and then the state legislature strips him of a bunch of power. And, every win at a legislative and at a Supreme Court level is challenged in the courts. And it just feels like I can't even count the number of times that I've seen a headline where it's North Carolina Republicans are trying to strip some Democrat or challenge some election after it's happened. And I just wonder how you combat that and work with that at a local level to engage people.
I mean, honestly, Allison Riggs's win, that 734 vote margin, has done an incredible number on people because of how hard that fight was. And to be truthful, I think if we had lost that court fight, we would have lost a lot of people's momentum after that, because it would have been such a discouraging time frame in North Carolina for us to have fought 6 months to hold on to a victory that we barely had by less than 1,000 votes in such a hard election year. And one thing that I credit that too is strong leadership, to be honest with you. And not from necessarily myself, but from like my voter protection director, Kat Lawson, is one of the smartest people that I've ever met in my life. Like Allison Riggs, our Supreme Court justice who was running that year, hired lawyers before that the election was even over with, because she was like, I know y'all are up to something already. Justice Anita Earls, right, always there in the thick of it, trying to make sure that the strategy that we had was something that we could understand, like what was this court case going to actually look like. And obviously they weren't commenting on a case because Justice Riggs recused herself and Justice Earls had obviously went up before. But it's having such good thought partners to go through this with, who were able to guide someone like me, who, to your point, Kerry, like I was 26 and they looked at me and they said, Anderson, this is going to be a $3 million lawsuit that you're going to have to figure out a way to pay for after we just spent $3 billion on an election. And like, that's your job is to go out there and figure out how are we going to pay for this, and making that case to donors, making that case to grassroots volunteers and organizers that like the chase and cure that we were doing right there at the end was worth it. But every bit of that race has put like a fire under the belly of everybody in North Carolina to say every vote is worth it. And I think that is done, and that race being nationalized in the way that it was. And that's a big thank you to Republicans in the way that they were trying to your point, retroactively throw out those voters. But I think it was a case of saying Republicans are going to try to build a playbook at the state level to retroactively deny election results. And Democrats in North Carolina have built a playbook of how to fight against it. And we're able to share that playbook now with any other state party, any other candidate that goes through that in the next election cycle. And I feel like that's a powerful way to say we have a lot of power when we're doing it together versus in silos. And that's what I think we had a lot of really good partners. Like we worked with Down Home to go chase and cure those ballots. We were working with Carolina Federation and so many of our partner organizations on the ground that, to me, that's what made it really cohesive, is that we had every leg of the stool in North Carolina working together. And that Riggs fight showed that we spent every bit of the money in the right way that we needed to. And also we won that court fight. And so we can put it up, we can put up and we can shut up in some ways. I don't know.
There you go.
It also is just a really important model nationally. Like I don't want us to be entering 2026 with too much fear in our heart about the Republicans continuing to look for ways to rig elections, but it is something we have to be very aware and ready for. And the fact that North Carolina showed us how to not shut up, like put up and not shut up, or whatever the saying was, is important for the rest of us. It's coming. I mean, we've seen dead heats in Georgia, and we've seen what that looks like in terms of Republican interference. We've seen it in North Carolina. We know that there's been FBI raids in Ohio in advance of a big Senate election. Like we know that they are the foes of democracy are not tired. They are not tired. And so neither should we. So I thank you for putting up that fight.
No, and thank all of the folks on this call, because I'll be honest, everybody who's listening to this was a part of that. Like we had national people from everywhere that were making folks understand who Allison Riggs was. And we needed that help in 2025, because or else I don't know how we would have made it through that. So just thank you to anybody out there who paid attention to that fight and helped us with it. It was an incredible for us to be able to do. And 2026, we're hoping is not going to be like that, because we're going to make sure Justice Earls has got a victory that is wider than a 10,000 vote margin in the state of North Carolina. Everybody else is also really secure about that. And we've also got a great candidate with Roy Cooper, who understands how important our courts are. And so he has really hugged our Supreme Court justice in every way too. And everywhere he's going, he's saying, you got to elect me, but you also got to elect Anita Earls. And I think that's a great strategy that we've got across the state right now.
Yeah, it's got to be amazing to have a, former governor who is as popular as he is at the top of the ticket, who really seems to know how to. He grew up on a farm, right? He's from a rural area, and so he Yeah, there you go. So, he knows how to like campaign across the state, which is great. Why don't it's a perfect time to head into your electoral goals. Obviously, flipping that Senate seat to Roy Cooper at the top of the ticket is, a huge goal, but what else you got cooking over there?
No, so our Senate seat, definitely, our Supreme Court race. So those are going to be the top two races on folks' ballots this year. And then we've got some great Republicans have tried in North Carolina, again, to gerrymander our state into absolute oblivion. But we have got some really good congressional candidates running across North Carolina this year. And I feel optimistic about a lot of our red to blue flips that we could have in the state. And looking at people like obviously Don Davis, who we've got to protect in NC01 and also in NC11, looking at Jamie Ager's seat, because that is a flippable district that Chuck Edwards right now sits in, who's also under federal investigation, mind y'all, right? And so we have some problems in Western North Carolina with the representation and how much Hurricane Helene recovery Western North Carolina has actually gotten back. So obviously in 2024, we had one of the worst natural disasters that's ever hit about 35 counties throughout Western North Carolina and ravaged communities across that side of the state. And we have seen less than 15% of federal funds actually be released back to that region of the state. And so having a member of Congress who's actually not willing to go side handle Donald Trump right now and actually wants to go up and say, where's our money? Because people across our state need it. And also really looking at our state legislature this year, too, because our state legislature, to your point, Kerry, has stripped our Democratic governor of powers that he is so rightfully owed by our state constitution. And our state legislature has dubbed themselves kingmakers in North Carolina and has decided that they have got no checks and balances whatsoever because our Republican courts will just back them up. And so really looking at our state house and Senate races that are competitive to be able to get a good hope. We've already broken the supermajority in the state house. We want to make sure, though, that we have got a veto proof super or majority in that place. And so we're trying to make sure that our minority this year looks a lot different. So we're at about 49 state house seats this year. We expect we could get to 55 to 56 state house seats, and we've got 60 to get to a majority. And so I call it a working minority. Is that what we're hoping for, so that we can pull some of those vulnerable Republicans that are in districts where they're going to get by the skin of their teeth as well, because we're going to be expanding our map this year also, and then breaking the supermajority in our state Senate, because we've got some incredible candidates running this year too. April Cook being one of those out of Cabarrus County for our state Senate that I'm really, really excited about. And also James Galliard in NC in Western or Eastern North Carolina. He's out there where like Rocky Mount and Roy Cooper's home district in that sense too. So he's running out of Nash County and is just an incredible candidate for that matter as well for the state Senate.
I'm excited. This all sounds really exciting.
I'll be honest, North Carolina, like everyone keeps saying it's going to be a big blue wave. And I'm like, we're going to work really, really hard to make this blue wave happen down here. But I feel like we have got the right candidates. We've got the right energy on the ground, and we've got some really good help from people across the state that believe in what we can do in the South again.
I just think we have to. I think that there are political folks in the Democratic Party, particularly Beltway centric, who for weeks and months have been saying, oh, big blue waves come in. Let's just focus on what comes in 28. And it's like, you guys, we're going to have the atmosphere is so volatile. We have to work. And the people want to see us working. Like, it is not enough to just show up and hope it works. Like, people want fighters right now. I hate to keep taking it big picture, but this week, we have our world's first trillionaire, and it happens to be Elon Musk, right? And we know Elon Musk went on a stage with a chainsaw saying he was going to break the American government, and boy, has he. And these policy choices that the Republicans are making have devastating impacts for people on the ground. The closing of health centers, closing of schools, closing of, VA clinics, closing of just anything that our community needs for basic response, for basic needs, is being cut. And I can't imagine that in North Carolina that doesn't have devastating consequences given the makeup of the state. And then also just a reminder, I'm glad that you mentioned Hurricane Helene too. It's a reminder that recovery is not complete. People do not feel whole. And we are in hurricane season again. Like, It's season again. So in any case, when I want our listeners, when they hear all these like numbers and seats and facts about like your electoral goals, to remind them the policy is the point because the people are the point.
Yeah. No way to put a pin on it, Tory, seriously.
Yeah. So, I mean, talk about some of the consequences. So, I mean, this is another area where you see a Democratic governor. I know that Roy Cooper is not still governor, right? Josh Stein is the current governor, also a Democrat. But when he was governor, he signed the Medicaid expansion into law, which people in North Carolina had been working for years, and finally got it across the finish line. And then Republicans last year clawed back nearly $50 billion from the state in Medicaid funding. So you guys are facing that deficit. I mean, it's just that, again, it's a situation where the Democrat does good, and then they're being hobbled by Republicans, in this case at the federal level. So, that is truly, having a devastating impact on people. I was reading a story about a place where they were desperate in Martin County, I believe, where they were like desperate to have a hospital reopened that had to close, and, talking about, life-threatening situations where people have to drive a couple hours in order to get to somewhere, an emergency situation. So I guess I bring that up in the sense that, what are you seeing as some of the top issues right now that are really resonating for people? And some of them may be, more regional, as you were saying earlier, but I'd be interested in hearing what your take on that is, Anderson.
I mean, I definitely think when you're looking, North Carolina has the second highest rural population than any state in the country other than Texas. And that's because of our diverse economic history in both agribusiness and manufacturing. Agribusiness is still the number one economic driver in North Carolina right now. I think what we hear the most out of, though, is the fact that those rural counties do not have an economic future in them, and that no one is helping provide that future. And so when folks look at me and they go, why are rural people voting against their own best interest? And I'm like, well, they don't know what their own best interest is, because right now the only thing that anybody's telling them is that they need to go land the plane slowly and figure out how their communities can just die off. And that's not exactly a message from the government and any political party that's given it to them so far that makes people believe that you actually care about the place that they're, to your point earlier, the place that they're from, the place that they live in, and the places that are most salient to them. And so definitely economic development in every way for all parts of North Carolina. So job growth and where it's happening and where it's not. But really, Eastern North Carolina is dealing with CAFO's farms and hog pollution. And honestly, because North Carolina also rivals Iowa for hog production. And so looking at water quality out there, like everybody has talked about how that when you turn on your faucet, you're drinking brown water. And like, that is not the way in which anybody should live their life right now. Western North Carolina, again, it's still housing that needs to be rebuilt. It is Western North Carolina recovery efforts from Hurricane Helene. And in the center of our state, a lot of that is just housing and a shortage of it for people that are moving to this sort of what we're defining in North Carolina as like the mega region that's happening, because the research triangle is sort of becoming the research square in some ways. And a lot of folks are the third fastest growing state in the country right now, but housing is a huge issue, and affordable housing, and making sure that, North Carolina right now, our state Republicans are trying to put on the ballot this year, a ballot referendum that's going to enshrine into our state constitution the fact that we couldn't raise the income tax for people above 3.9% ever for our state history. And that is just something, when you're looking at a billionaire tax that we would want to be able to do, when you're thinking about taxing the rich and taxing people right now who have enough to be able to provide to others, like having a 3.9% income tax is not going to help anybody or a cap in that income tax. So they're saying the income tax cannot be risen more than 3.9% for folks. Mm-hmm. And the way that Republicans are pitching that is like, no one wants taxes, right? And I'm like, again, we want people who have made their fair share off of the backs of people in this country to pay their fair share in taxes. And we can't have that right now if we've got amendments coming into our state constitution that look like this. There's also a right to work amendment that's being put on the ballot this year in North Carolina. They're trying to enshrine right to work laws, which is right to work for less, right, into our state constitution. I mean, I have got Republicans that are doing some insane shit, to be real with y'all. And in every way, we're trying to make sure that we're there defending, and that we're also there organizing the people that we need into those positions in office, because it's not going to change otherwise. Like they have shown that they have no care for the people in North Carolina. And so all of these issues to me are huge, and they're populating across our state. What you said about Martin County, though, that hospital closure happened because, right, our state legislature spent 10 years denying Medicaid expansion. They did not want money from the federal government that was going to another state if it didn't go to North Carolina. They were so against Obamacare and everything that it represented to help people get these subsidies that they were willing to take 10 years and deny 600,000 people health insurance access. And that meant that Martin County lost their hospital, and that the story that got told about that was in the New York Times. And it was a woman who said that she watched her husband die in the passenger seat next to her because the hospital, like, she got caught at a stoplight and the emergency room doors, she was staring at them. She could see them. And when you think about the way in which that people live in communities right now, the number one thing you should have is the ability to be able to have a public school in your backyard and a hospital there too. And if that story doesn't get everybody, I don't know what will. But when we talk about healthcare in a real way, and Tori, I love your point to it, of just for the listeners out there, if I can put a story to it for you, that is what rural North Carolina is experiencing right now. And it, to be honest with you, it breaks my heart every time that I think about reading that article and I hear it all over again, because I feel like I memorized it, to be truthful with you, because it is just so emblematic of what we're seeing, not just in rural North Carolina, but across the country too, right? So
yeah, country. I know. I'm not going to let you cry alone.
I ain't that emotional, but I'm just like, God, I talked to the county commissioners, and honestly, if the BBB had not passed, those county commissioners in Martin County had a plan to get that hospital reopened with a public-private partnership. And they said, look, we're not getting the rebates, right, that we would otherwise if we had had Medicaid reimbursements. And that just, it tore that plan all to pieces. So our local folks are for it.
Yeah, the BBB, that, just for our listeners, that Anderson is talking about, of course, is Donald Trump's and Republicans' bill where they, clawed back all of this money last year on a party line vote. So along with, it was lower taxes and all kinds of stuff, but they clawed back a bunch of the Medicaid funding that was available. So,
but of course, they made sure ICE had plenty of funding.
Right. Right.
That's so helpful.
Right. They quadrupled their budget or something like that. So hundreds of billions to ICE to do the horrific things that they've been doing. I did want to put a spotlight on, when you talk about rural voters in North Carolina, it's a high percentage, or fairly high percentage of them that are Black too, right? So it's a really diverse group of people that you're talking about. I think sometimes we hear rural voters, we think white, or people think white or whatever, but this is a diverse group of folks you're talking about.
Well, yeah, new immigrant families too, right? I know North Carolina has a really diverse population.
Mm-hmm. No, I think when people hear the word rural, they assume white, and I'm like, wow, y'all may have never visited the South before, if that is your association and assumption. And so I would encourage anybody who thinks that to also get out into our region, geographical region of the country, because 55% of Black Americans live in the South, and a lot of our states are majority rural states, if not most of them. And so I think that it's incredibly important to recognize that North Carolina has got a Black Belt region of our state that is Don Davis's congressional district in CD1. It's all of Eastern North Carolina. And then you've also got a high, about 26% of our state is Black, 10% of our state is Hispanic, and those population numbers keep rising, along with our AAPI community, which is also a faster growing community in North Carolina right now. Burke County, which is a random rural county in Western North Carolina, has got one of the largest Hmong populations that exist in the state, and that's a rural county in North Carolina. And I always like to shout that out, because I think so many people also think that Eastern North Carolina is the only place that you find diversity in your rural counties, and it's not. Like, Western North Carolina also has it too. It's just, you also have to be willing to engage in those communities in the right way. And I think that we've seen a lot of aggressive outreach from our organizers, from our county parties, but also from our partners in the state too, to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was reading one article about you and your work in North Carolina, and it was talking about your engagement of Black voters and rural voters and whatever. Have you put some specific practices in place or whatever at the state party level to work on that voter engagement program?
I mean, the number one thing that not just Black voters, but rural voters in general would say to you, and also I think voters in general would say to you, is that we're tired of a campaign that only comes to our door 3 months before the election. And so the year-round organizing team that we started in the state party was meant to engage in areas where the party had really sort of left the mark on and not been in a long time. And a lot of our communities, I think they needed to see a party that showed up for them again. And so we have really worked to try to rebuild relationships in communities that I think have just not had the party's support or the party be there. And a lot of that looks like supporting candidates at the local level. We're one of the only state parties in the country that gives out Vote Builder, which is our database for free to all of our candidates. Typically, state parties use that as like a revenue generator. And something that we've tried to do is democratize data, because we're like, everybody should have access to this. And we're asking candidates to run for office right now without actually having their data collections come in on the other end. And that means some of these counties in the rural areas that get knocked are not actually, like, the state party never gets that data back. So we don't know about the people that we're talking to. And that's something that I think is really important and something we've done over the last 3 years. The other thing is just we've set up a rural tour that we do every summer, basically. So I did it last year. I went to about 55 counties throughout the summer. We go to all 100 counties every year in North Carolina. And I think that is really important too for a state party chair to show up everywhere. But we don't just show up with me. We bring candidates, we bring surrogates, we bring our statewide elected officials back. So like the communities that said we only hear from this person every 3 months before the election, I'm like, well, now Mo Green's in your backyard every other couple months, you know? And like my state superintendent, who was one of the 2 statewide red to blue flips that we had in 2024, Mo Green is phenomenal, but he's also someone who's an advocate for public education. And I think that something that's really important is to also show my Black Democrats like who represents them right now. And also Mo Green being our Black superintendent, like that representation matters. Having Justice Anita Earls, who's the only Black woman on the bench right now in North Carolina, be the face of the Democratic Party this year matters to me, because I want people to be able to see themselves in this party and also be able to understand that someone like her is fighting for a justice system that treats everybody fairly. And right now we don't have that in North Carolina. And it's been a big motivator, especially we were out in Moore County this last weekend knocking doors and predominantly Black communities there. And really one of the things that we heard a lot from folks was just over policing and the way in which that cops were interacting in communities with folks. And so looking at talking about the justice system in a way that's like, you know, we want judges that are going to be people that have had experiences and that understand that there is, you know, internalized racism within our court system. And actually, Justice Earls has been somebody where Republicans tried to take her off the bench because she had said that our courts were at one point in time prejudiced against Black people because they were not hiring Black folks to work in our Supreme Court. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to engage and also to keep it consistent, because I just don't think we've done that in a while. And it's not a problem, to be honest, with both of y'all that I feel like I'm going to solve over 3 years, because it didn't happen over 3 years. And it's something where I feel like this is the 20 to 30 year, like we're building out an infrastructure that's supposed to last and continuously engage long after I'm no longer here. And that maybe, you know, our staff has changed over too, and we've got new people, but we're building the building blocks to make that happen.
That's very cool. Can I get a little tactical? I'm just curious. There's a lot of talk about the media environment, the fractured media environment. I'm just coming back. I'll just give you a little background. I'm coming back from a conference in Detroit around fair taxes. So when you were talking about the part about rural communities not understanding where the next job's going to come from, and so thinking about job development and financial growth and stability for rural communities, along coupled with the conversation about where revenue comes and how we tax people. And it sounds to me like the Republican powers that be in North Carolina are chopping both ends. Like they're not bringing jobs and they're not bringing in revenue. So then it's like, what's there to help people. Anyway, but that was the point of this conference, was to talk about these things. North Carolina was brought up a lot. The fight on that the fight about that ballot measure came up a lot. So people got your back, Anderson. People are talking about it. People want to help. But the conference also actually was centered in this hotel where I stayed, called WWJ, which was the first radio station in all of the United States of America in 1920. It was the first station it was the first radio that was brought for mass communication purpose. That before then, radio had been like a maritime contraption. And it was the first time in America that they started to establish that little brief window for the boomer generation of everybody listening to the same things and having sort of a collective sense of truth. And it occurred to me that we Americans have lived in a time of fractured truth more than in a time of centralized truth. Like, I was like, oh, wow, there's probably lessons for us back in the in the 1920s, pre-1920s era, about how people distributed information that we should be listening to. And so given that we're back in this like old era of lots of weird information coming at us and traveling salesmen coming through telling us they got snake oil for us, like that's what's online right now. How are you approaching that media question in a state where you do have rural people that are probably getting a lot of information from YouTube influencers, TikTok, that sort of thing?
They might be asking AI questions.
Yeah. Do you have a tech response or?
So this is the thing about AI. I actually love when people ask AI questions about North Carolina, because what's going to come up is my press releases. So like AI scrapes, right? Everything from Google. All of my shit's on the internet. And so like we can do the old school press releases because I still need to meet my old school newspapers that are in rural North Carolina, at least the few that still exist out there, that like will take that press release and still appreciate like getting something that they are used to seeing. But it's also putting that online so that when AI is scraping everything, it's scraping my information. And so when you Google Michael Whatley in North Carolina, the sources under what comes up from Google is the NCDP.
That's
so
great.
Like, yes, we are doing everything that we can on the digital side to make sure that that's the case. But I do agree with you, Tori, of like information we are in silos right now. And I keep telling folks the number one place that people get their information is from their networks and their friends and their family. Like that's who people trust the most, because people actually don't trust the internet as much because, to your point, they don't know if what they're watching is fact-based or not. And so a lot of young people, especially, it's their grandparents, it's their aunts, it's their uncles, it's their parents that they're still listening to. And that's what I think we're finding a lot of still, like in rural places, right? Like your parents' impressions still become your own. Like I think that tired trope is still real and existing, to be frank. And then but the other side of that is just, we'll go anywhere. I will talk to anybody. I had a high school student that said, hey, I have a podcast that I'd really love for you to come be on, Anderson. And he was like, I got about 35 listeners. I said, well, if they're all in that high school of yours, sign me up. You know, like I think it's the willingness to also spend my time and be able to find like what is niche in a candidate's area. So I've got Iris Bender, who's a candidate that we've got out in Western North Carolina. I'm really trying to get her on Appalachia right now because I was like, that is all of that geographical coverage for that podcast. And so you'd reach a good number of people out there, but you'd also be able to connect with the people that are on that podcast. And so trying to like match up to where would audiences overlap for our candidates and also for the state party, and putting myself, I'm kind of the testing ground, I think. Like I'll go out there and do it first. And then if it makes sense for somebody else to come out, we'll use candidates next, because sometimes it's not worth somebody's time to go out there and talk to just a podcast of 35 people. I get that. But I think it's worth my time to talk to anybody that's willing to listen to me. And so in so many circumstances, we get to figure out like what's what. And then we've also built, North Carolina, I think, is a rare state because we actually have a very good basis of still like local and state media that exists. So using all the local newspapers and news stations that still have that wide swath, but then overlaying to that digital ecosystem that we're in right now, which is like new media, right? And I think it's just doing all of the above and having a diverse team that can sort of account for that too. So we've got some people that are really well-versed in Reddit, some people that are really well-versed in Substack, and I'm like, you own what you're good at, you know? And I think that's kind of how we've managed to do it so far. The one piece of our digital team that we're still kind of missing is I've made one of the folks on my team learn how to be a videographer. Catherine Jeans, I think, is phenomenal, but they are definitely learning on the fly in some ways. So a videographer would definitely be like another step in our digital and comms apparatus. But we do have about 7 people, and we'll make a website for anybody, a logo for anybody. Our top comms team does digital ads rapidly for folks too, and also for the state party. So we're doing YouTube ads as well. So I feel like we cover a wide range. It's just like the reach that you're able to get with that is sometimes limited based on how much money you can put towards something at any point.
Yeah.
All right. We've got just a few minutes left because we're coming towards the top of the hour. I do want to do one thing, which is look forward, because we are all, at some point, we will be in a situation where in the Democratic presidential primary. And Anderson, I know that you recently pitched the DNC Rules Committee on moving North Carolina up out of the Super Tuesday, the swath of like, I don't know, 20 states or something that usually go on Super Tuesday. Can you just give us a real quick rundown of like why you want to move North Carolina up out of that Super Tuesday primary slot and how it went?
The pitch that I give to Republicans is that 4 states in the entire country get the economic revenue for being first in the nation or being one of those early states. Why would North Carolina not want another $90 million of economic revenue coming into our state? The pitch that I made to the DNC, though, because I think that what we should really care about is the electoral advantages. North Carolina has 20 statewide races. In 2028, we will have the most out of any state in the country. 3 of those will be state Supreme Court races that will be able to determine the fate of the court. And when I say I'm here to win back the state Supreme Court, I know that down ballot races oftentimes do not get the resources that they need to win those seats. And so 3 of those races is going to be a lot of money that's going to be pushed into the state of North Carolina. And I want it to be going towards candidates, elevating them that are going to change the fate of Congress. So again, we're able to take back that state Supreme Court. In 29, we can reverse what Republicans did to us in 2023, which was made partisan and racial gerrymandering legal again in North Carolina. And it would automatically give back almost 4 House of Representative seats to the Democratic Party nationally when we're missing them throughout the South. And I do not think that we can not be strategic at a time where Republicans have been so volatile, to use the word that Tory did earlier, about taking away human rights and dignities in this country. Like we have to make sure that we're investing and using money wisely. And something that I get from being from a rural part of the state is like, I value every dollar that somebody gives to me in a way that's like, I think that us as a party should also do that, especially after 24, when we spent so much money and people feel like we should have done something different here, you know? And I think that we need people to want to trust that what we're doing is right. And to me, North Carolina has every advantage of, I talked about it earlier, the population diversity that we have, the rural diversity that we have, and just the economic diversity that we have too. I'm like, if you can win in a state like North Carolina, you can win anywhere else in any other state in the country, in my opinion.
Well, Anderson, it sounds like you're using your Tom Wasley. I have a girlfriend whose family's originally from the Northeast, and they moved to North Carolina when she was very young. They were professors at a university, and they had their first parent-teacher conference with the teacher, and they were like, the teacher's like, Anna's great. She just doesn't use her Tom Wasley. And for the longest time, they thought Tom Wasley was a person, and they were like, to understand how to get their daughter this resource from Tom Wasley. So I heard you say.
My executive director earlier today looked at me and she goes, I need that picture. And I said, that picture of what? And she said, that picture. And I was like, you mean that picture of a person, Lillian? I was like, man, I can hear the Statesville coming out in your girlfriend. She was laughing so hard that I could not understand her for the life of me. So it happens all the time down here too.
Okay. Well, I think we have to leave it there. And I tell you, as I was reading that article about your DNC pitch, after you finished making the pitch, one of the rules members said, thank you for your insights. We are all awake now, which I thought was funny.
There was Mignon Moore too that said, that's the chair of that committee. I said, oh, thank you. She's my queen. I love her. I was like,
okay, so at the risk of parodying that person, I will say, Anderson, thank you for joining us. We are all awake now, and thank you to Tory too for joining us. I know she just dropped back in after being away for a while, so it was great to have you. Thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey to building a better American future. If you're still a lurker or a first timer, go subscribe right now. Don't miss your chance before you get distracted by another Trump tweet or war, or who knows what's coming next down the pike from him. So, and with that, until next week, please do good, be well, hug your loved ones, and tell your dog I say hi.